Okay, for this video, I'm going to tell you how to add texture into your drawing. And as I am like starting here, the very first thing that I want to do is I want to make sure that my base shades are accurate to the base shade. Like when I squint at this part of like his eyebrow, for example, I want it to be the correct shade. So his eyebrow is very, very dark and this side of his face is dark. And so I want to make sure that I keep adding in that base. Like basically if there was no eyebrow there, what would the color be that's underneath, you know? And so for some of it, I'm going to need to add in a little bit of charcoal to get it to more of that like level 5 for the places where it's like extra dark for him. In other places, I can just leave it as like the gray of the page. But definitely at this stage, I'm wanting to get it to that like level, that darkness level that it needs to be at. And then take it all the way to the corners of the page. Don't forget that. You want it to extend all the way to the corners. All right. So now I kind of have it like the darkness level that it should be. I mean, over here it's a little bit darker. I'm gonna just all the way to the top of the page. I'm gonna add that in. And basically it just looks like a face without an eyebrow. So now I'm gonna go in. The cool thing about texture is it's all about adding in tiny areas of darks and lights, your extremes, especially with like hair. So now that I have my base layer, I have two options. I can either add this like hair texture with my pencil, or I can erase out the texture. One thing that's really important with texture is to notice the direction that the hairs are moving in. So when you are drawing an eyebrow, let me see if we can find a paper here really quickly. When you're drawing an eyebrow, for example, and you may want to practice this in your sketchbook, but the eyebrow, you want to notice the direction the hairs are moving in. So like toward the center, the hairs probably, for most people, will move up and then start to move kind of out in this direction. Eyebrow hairs and grass are different. The same is true for eyelashes. And I say that because when people are drawing like in elementary school, they maybe like draw like grass like this, right? Like all the lines are the same size and the same height and the same thickness. But when we're talking about hair and hair texture, like all of them grow at different lengths, they grow in different directions, they overlap. They're different, you know, sizes. You don't want them to be like super short, like it looks like you shaved your eyebrow, but at the same time, you don't want them to be overly long. Like I'm not trying to like, this is my eyebrow, you know? Now, of course, you're drawing 8 times bigger, but this is the general shape of an eyebrow. Like it starts out in toward the inside or the tear duct area. It starts out kind of moving typically more in an upward direction. Notice I'm like pushing up. Another thing to know about like actually making the strokes is I kind of press down at the top and lift up. That makes it a little bit lighter on the end, and that can really help with your texture application as well. For eyelashes, so let's say, and I would practice this in your sketchbook again, let's say this is your eye. So a couple things to note. Eyelashes do not grow out from the eyeball. So you want to make sure that you are not starting your eyelashes right next to the white of the eye. Instead, eyelashes will grow from this thick, dark area, this lash line that you created that's on top of the white of the eye. So you don't want to start the eyelashes right here. You want to attach them to the dark shadow. They're just an extension of the dark shadow that's there. And so you also want to look at your reference image. Like you want to make sure, where did my reference image go? There it is. You want to make sure that like your eyelashes, everybody's eyelashes move in a different direction. Some of them kind of come, and I'll draw a little bit larger over here so that you can see. Some eyelashes will actually kind of come down across the eye, and they'll tend to move like inward, or sometimes they move like straight down across the eye, and you can just see like a little bit of texture there. You know, oftentimes like boys will have, you know, here, this doesn't even look like hairs really. It just looks like very short texture, like very like fuzzy texture. And that's because like, some boys, you'll see more eyelashes, but others you won't. Like sometimes it comes across this way. And the same is true for girls as well, by the way. It's just that a lot of times, like if there's any makeup or, you know, eyelashes have been curled or something, you'll see that like girls will have like more prominent eyelashes, you know, so that's one thing to keep in mind. Also for his eyelashes, like there's just kind of like white lines that come up, like you don't see the eyelashes a ton. So really it's more about like just making the lash line more uneven. So I'll just kind of show you here. Like for him, I'm kind of looking at like where the lash line becomes more uneven, and I'm just kind of like adding in just the smallest amount of texture. If you make the eyelashes too big or too dominant, then they'll appear very unnatural. They'll stick out from the face, and that's something to keep in mind. So I'm just kind of like adding on that texture a little bit, and then I'm actually going to use the eraser to draw some of the light lines for the texture in his, like the upper lash line, where it's just kind of like white. Then I'm gonna go back in and maybe I'll like add in a bit more texture here. I'm gonna check my portfolio. I swear I had a tortilla in. I hope I didn't forget it, but I think I did. I'm just also adding in some black in between. This is good for like hair texture, like to have like some of that in there. So there we go. Really, really subtle texture there. Now let's look at the eyebrow. Oh, he does have some eyelashes on the lower eyelash line. Again, like I'm just gonna like barely press with my white pencil cap eraser. There are more of these back behind my desk, by the way, so if you need to go get them, go ahead. Notice my movements are like really irregular. Like this isn't like, you know, again, this doesn't look like grass. And then like where they get longer, I'm like actually making them longer. So maybe like you made them too bright or you pressed too hard, just take your like paper towel over the top and look, I just softened them down. I made them much more subtle so it didn't stand out quite as much. That is definitely something you can always do. If you feel like you went too far with it, you can always like tone it down. I'm checking my portfolio super fast just to make sure. Again, I really thought I had a tortilla and I'm not seeing one, so I'm so bummed about that. Why didn't I grab one of those? All right, so with your, I can still make it work. It's just annoying to have to do that. So for your eyebrow texture, let me get started with that. The eyebrow texture. So his eyebrow texture is going to be made up again of some lines and then some erasing. So I'm going to start out over here on the dark side, and I'm just going to look at the direction the hairs are moving in. I'm just going to add some of those in over the top. Now you might feel like, you know, what's that really doing? Let me get a more sharpened charcoal pencil. You may feel like what's the purpose? What's that really doing? Well, I mean, where you can see that there's a little bit of texture, even if it's like black lines on gray lines, you know, you should still go ahead and add it in. So I'm just kind of gradually like adding in some of this texture here. Some places I see it kind of moves up. Notice how long the lines are that I'm using to make this texture, and how I'm being like very uneven. I'm kind of moving in a general, you know, the same general direction, but it's not, everything is not exactly in one line. And I'm really not pressing very hard either, so that's an important thing to note. And then I start to see the line, like the movement, the direction kind of changes. Here it gets like heavier, so I'm adding in more lines there, pressing a bit harder. And it goes all the way to the top of the picture here. And then as I come across, like, there's just movement every direction. So I'm just kind of like, based on this eyebrow, I'm just like setting this eyebrow and moving in the directions that I see this eyebrow moving in. Now these lines, I don't have to be super worried because I'm definitely not done with this. I'm gonna be adding a bunch more onto it. I'm just gonna keep going here. Adding in different elements here. Okay, I'm gonna go to about right there. I mean, really, I'm gonna go as far as I see. I mean, it has like eyebrow hairs all the way notice an eyebrow hair is about the length of the whole eyebrow. So that's something to like keep in mind. And when you get a little toward the end, it might get a little bit less, you know, there might be a little bit less like hairs and that kind of thing. I mean, everybody's eyebrows are different. So it's not actually white on this side, by the way. I should have shaded it in, but I just didn't for sake of time. Okay, so once I get most of that kind of laid out, now I'm going to go back in with the eraser, and I'm going to pop out some lighter areas. I mean, you can see, because I had my base fairly correct, it's fairly decent, like, already. But now I'm going to pop out some areas using that white pencil cap eraser. So I'm just going to use that to go in and like lift out where I can see like there's some little like areas where there's like pops of highlight. My dog is really wanting my attention right now, you guys. She's like on my leg. You can probably hear her kind of crying in the background. She's saying, why aren't you talking to me and why are you drawing? So I'm just kind of going through here, adding in a little bit of that texture. Again, it just depends on like what it looks like on your page for like how much of the white you add in. If it's like more specked, or, you know, you can see like more specks in it. I'm also in some places, like where I can see a line is drawn on top, I'm just going to kind of lightly touch over the top to erase out where that line was like kind of introduced into the drawing, because that is going to make it blend more. Blending is all about those transitions. And so if the line is too harsh, it's going to appear harsh. And now I'm just going to take my paper towel. For you, I would take a tortilla instead. And I'm just going to blend down some of it, like just lightly. Like I'm going to go over the ends of like where the hairs started. Do you see how that just instantly kind of blended into the skin a little bit? If it got a little bit too white or light, I'm just kind of going over the top just lightly. I don't want to get rid of the texture, but I do want it to blend in and look like part of the drawing and not like it's drawn on top of the drawing. And just like I did with the eyelashes, I mean, this is something I want to like definitely make it look like it's part of the drawing. If I need to go back in and add more areas of dark, I can do that. You know, I mean, a charcoal drawing is never finished. You can continually work on it and continually make some changes as needed. I'm going to lighten that up just a little bit darken it up because it looked a little bit light. And then last, so your very last step is to clean up all the details. Please watch my next video for instructions on that. And also to add in flecks in the inside of the eye.